Alright, welcome back to the JFK Assassination Audit. It's now 13 March, and we're going to go on with video number 70, Frazier Follies number 4. Alright, so we're at the Clay Shaw trial in New Orleans. This is the testimony and actually the cross-examination of Buell Wesley Frazier. All right, so the cross-examination is being done by Mr. Diamond, who I believe is one of the attorneys for Clay Shaw. It says, you went to work for the Texas School Book Depository around the middle of September 1963. Is that right, sir? Well, as I remember, I went to work at the Texas School Book Depository around the first part of September, somewhere between the 1st and the 15th. I don't remember precisely what day. Approximately how long had you been working there when Lee Oswald went to work there? I would say roughly around 4 or 5 weeks. 4 or 5 weeks. Now, this Texas School Book Depository, do they have only a warehouse, or is there another one? They have two. They have two? Yes, sir. Where's the other one located? The one other than the one that you and Oswald were in. Is located down by the parking lot, right adjacent to the parking lot. It is located down across from the parking lot where the employees park their cars. In city blocks, about how many blocks away would you say? I would say around 2.5, 3 blocks. 2.5, 3 blocks? Yes. So again, what he's talking about is there's actually another warehouse that other employees are working in, and it's north across the parking lot from the Texas School Book Depository, and out of sight of Dealey Plaza, out of sight of the intersection of Elm and Houston. And again, you want to think about how lucky Oswald is to actually come back from New Orleans via Mexico City and not be able to get into Russia or to Cuba. And how lucky or unlucky he is that this left-wing Marxist is able to get a job right in the building where the President of the United States is going to be traveling by. I mean, how lucky can you be? You have 2 warehouses you can choose from, and they put him in the warehouse nearest where the route where the President is going to be going by. Think about how lucky or unlucky Oswald is. Anyway, just another coincidence, I guess. Yes, and when you two were there at the Texas School Book, did you have any choice as to which warehouse you would be assigned to, or was it just up to the person hiring you? No, sir, I did not. That was just up to Mr. Truly. So Mr. Truly was the one who assigned him to the Texas School Book Depository right there on Houston and Elm. Now, the other warehouses that you're talking about, did that front on Elm Street too? Would you repeat that, please? The other School Book Depository, the one that you and Oswald were not assigned to, did it also front on Elm Street? No, sir, it did not. That's because it was 2 or 3 blocks north of Houston and Elm. But again, think about how lucky Oswald is. Here's this Marxist, crazy revolutionary, and he just happens to get a job right at the building that overlooks the president's route so he can shoot him from the 6th floor. I mean, luckiest assassin ever. A lot of times, people have to work at getting a position to be an assassin. Like Hinckley, he had to work his way into the press corps there. You had other people that would show up, try to shoot Garfield. You had, the assassin of Lincoln was able to sneak upstairs to the president's balcony booth and shoot him there. But that still required a lot of work. He had to convince people that he was actually part of the drama troupe that was performing that night. And he was an actor also. But think about how lucky Oswald would have been. I mean, let's just think here. If Ruth Payne hadn't have found out about Oswald, if Ruth Payne hadn't have been lucky enough to be playing cards with Frazier's sister in the neighborhood, she never would have found out about her brother, Frazier, getting the job at the school book depository, and never would have been able to call and find out if they have jobs available, and then call Oswald and say, hey, go down and apply for this job. You may be able to get a job. And then for Oswald to move and get a new room the same day, right before he went to the interview. Just think if Oswald had not gotten that job at the school book depository. He would have been stuck with hiding in the bushes somewhere. He would have been stuck with finding another building and managing somehow to work his way up into that building to shoot the president and not be seen. Just think how Oswald's life and the president's life would have been different if Mrs. Payne hadn't helped him get that job. Isn't that amazing? He's the luckiest assassin ever, right? Anyway, keep going. Now, about how long were you a coworker with Oswald? Oh, I would say he went to work somewhere around middle October, and I worked with him daily there until, prior to the assassination. It would be a month and a week, roughly. Is that it? Well, a little over a month. Well, roughly around a month. Now, did you see Lee Oswald ever working every working day during that period? You mean from the time that he went to work until the time of the assassination? Yes. I saw him every workday, yes. Did you ever see him wear a beard? No, sir, I didn't. What they're referring to is this Leon Oswald that you see Perry Russo and you see Sylvia Odio. Perry Russo's in New Orleans, and he sees Leon Oswald, who has this scruffy beard, at David Ferry's as a roommate, and at this party with Clay Shaw, who's on trial. They also see a Leon Oswald through Sylvia Odio, who looks like Oswald but with a beard. Okay? All right. So that's what they're referring to there. They're trying to say that, Lee Oswald never had a beard. If you read Perry Russo's testimony, even though I think it was a different person and not Lee Oswald, I think it was probably this guy, one or two guys that were imitating Oswald. Okay, because you see him at Sylvia Odio's after he's supposed to be in Mexico City. Okay, and then you see him at this party in New Orleans, and then the very next day after the party, Perry Russo says the party's on a certain date. The very next day, Oswald's down at the New Orleans Mexico consulate trying to get a visa to go into Mexico City. So I find that interesting that the very next day after the party, because when you look at the dates, that Perry Russo says he doesn't know that Oswald went to the, Perry Russo doesn't know that Oswald went to the Mexican consulate the very next day. All he knows is the day of the party. Okay? So when he says that, and then the FBI's managed to put it together that Oswald was at the Mexican consulate in New Orleans trying to get the visa, and the FBI places that on the day after the party. Although the FBI at the time doesn't know what Perry Russo knows. They never even interviewed Perry Russo. Okay? Perry Russo doesn't know anything for years about the connections until he sees David Ferry arrested. Actually, I think he sees David Ferry on TV, and then David Ferry kills himself. And then that's when Perry Russo makes contact with the District Attorney Garrison. So what they're trying to do here it showed that Oswald, whoever Perry was seeing wasn't Oswald. And another thing that Perry says, if you listen to him and you read his testimony, he says that even though this person, Leon, had a beard and was dirty looking, that the beard looked fake, like it was glued on. Again, I think that this is not Oswald, but you have to look and read and put everything together that everyone says, and then it all starts to be really clear and make sense. Because the thing about people doing testimony before the DA and the FBI is they don't know that what the testimony is of other people. Okay? What they've told the FBI and what they've told the DA. So they're just telling you what they know, and then the DA and them know what other people have told them, so they know what questions to ask. Anyway. All right. We'll keep going here. All right, so it says, no, sir, no, sir, I didn't. He didn't see him with a beard. Would you say that he was clean-shaven, or did you let his beard grow several days at a time? Well, he was like I stated yesterday. He was light-haired and natural and light-haired person. A beard does not show up as well as the dark person, and to be frank with you, I never did notice whether he was shaven. Clean-cut every day or not, because like I stated previously, when someone works around there every day, you don't exactly give them once over at the first thing every morning. All right, I'm also going to do something real quick here. Watch. All right, so this is a photo of Oswald on August 9th, 1963. He's clean-shaven, completely clean-shaven. Look at that. This guy is a soldier. He's not some bum, some beatnik hanging around hanging around David Ferrie's apartment. Okay? So, when you look at the timeline, okay, you see that Oswald, or Leon Oswald, is spotted by Perry Russo on, let me look at the date here. Hold on one second. Okay, so we'll start here. So it says on 5 August, according to anti-Castro militant Carlos Bruguiere, Oswald visited him on August 5th and 6th at a store he owned in New Orleans. Bruguiere was the New Orleans delegate of the anti-Castro organization Directorio Revolucionaria Estudianti, the DRE. Bruguiere would later tell the Warren Commission that he believed Oswald's visits were an attempt by Oswald to infiltrate the group. August 1963, Oswald, Ferrie, and Bannister are spotted in Clinton, Louisiana, by people trying to vote. Spoke with Representative Reeve Morgan. Okay, now, if you go back and read the timeline in their testimony, I put this just general August, but it was most likely late August, okay, closer to September. While there, okay, in Clinton, actually over a few days, Oswald was spotted in line, okay, trying to register to vote. He was spotted by the sheriff, by members of the registration clerk for the county. He was also spotted by representatives of the civil rights group there as he stood in line. Ferrie and Bannister were spotted in his black limousine or Cadillac in Clinton, and Oswald drove off with them. Another time, Oswald is seen driving up with a pregnant woman to one of the persons who cut a hair cutter in Clinton a few days later, got a haircut, and then said he was looking for a job, and then he referred him to Reeve Morgan. And then Reeve Morgan referred him to the Louisiana State Hospital. None of them said that Oswald was bushy-haired, dirty, or wearing a beard. And this is late August. Okay? August 9th, Oswald's arrested, passing out Fair Play for Cuba committee flyers. He's attacked by Carlos Brungier. And right here, there's the photo. He looks like he just got a haircut at Clinton, Louisiana, right there. That looks like a fresh haircut. Or maybe a little bit after he gets a haircut. But that doesn't look like a bushy-haired man right there. Okay, and we'll keep going. After that, he was interviewed on the 17th of August on WSU, which is a TV station, and then they did a radio debate on the 21st with Carlos Brungier at WSU, and that right there, the 21st, okay, they took pictures and video of Oswald, and he doesn't have a beard, he's not bushy looking, he's not scraggly or dirty looking. All right. And then right after that, Carolee Thornley travels to Mexico. Now, Carolee Thornley had been, from what I understand, traveling between New Orleans and California. So I think that either the person that Perry Russo saw was Carrie Thornley, or this Llewellyn guy, who is also supposedly a roommate of David Ferry. And you see here that just a few days later, Perry Russo meets Leon Oswald at David Ferry's apartment. So if Carrie Thornley is in California and he travels to Mexico City, he's there from the 29th to the 3rd, that means he's ended up 4 days later, after Mexico City, possibly in New Orleans, where Perry Russo saw him. And then Perry Russo also sees Leon Oswald and Clem Bertrand, I wonder if that's supposed to be an R, who's also Clay Shaw, at David Perry's apartment discussing the assassination. And we'll get into all this later in the timeline. But another important thing about Perry Russo, let me see here. Anyway, we'll get into this. There's also James Llewellyn that looked like Oswald also, and he went by Leon. So I think that's probably who everyone was seeing was James Llewellyn. And then the very next day, after, let's see, yeah, the 16th, Perry Russo sees Lee Oswald and Clay Shaw at David Ferry's party discussing assassinating the president. And then the very next day, on the 17th, Oswald is issued this 15-day Mexican tourist visa. And he's spotted with George Godot. And then 3 days later, Richard Case Nagel walks into a bank in El Paso, fires one shot into the roof, and then walks outside and sits down on the curb and waits for the police to come and arrest him. And then 3 days later after that, David Atlee Phillips, Maurice Bishop, is made head of the CIA's chief of Cuban operations in Mexico City. It's just all these coincidences, and they all start after Kennedy announces that he's going to be traveling to Dallas. And then the same day that Maurice Bishop is made the head of Cuban operations in Mexico City. And what that means, I went over that testimony yesterday, is that they were monitoring what was going on at the Cuban embassy. And the same day that happens, Ruth Paine swings by from Washington, D.C., where she said she went to watch the Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech and marched there. She swings through New Orleans, picks up Marina Oswald and Oswald's guns, and doesn't recognize their guns. So I guess 8-month pregnant Marina Oswald was lugging Oswald's guns around and putting them in the back of Ruth Paine's station wagon, and she wasn't recognizing that those were guns. And anyway, it says later that night that Oswald was seen leaving New Orleans, but the very next day he also cashed his check, or a couple of days later he cashed his check. The very next day after that, the day after Maurice Bishop becomes head of the Cuban operations in Mexico City, Maurice Bishop is seen in Dallas by Antonio Bastiana, who's one of the anti-Castro Cubans. He's being handled by his handler, Maurice Bishop, David Atlee Phillips. Okay. Antonio Bastiana testifies that he saw Oswald leaving Maurice Bishop's office and heading out the very next day. So, did Oswald go to Dallas with Ruth Paine and Marina Oswald? Did he follow up later and then go to Mexico City after that? Did he get his instructions and then head to Mexico City after that? We don't know. Because it says here that Oswald was seen cashing his unemployment check the next day after that, on the 25th, at the Winn-Dixie in New Orleans. And that same day, the White House officially announces, not that they had already planned it and discussed with FBI and CIA and Secret Service, but they officially announced that the president's going to be heading to Dallas around November 21st, 22nd. And then the next day, the Dallas Morning News publishes that the president's coming to Dallas. And then early that morning, on the same day, Oswald was seen boarding a bus in Laredo, okay, or for Laredo, and crosses the border into Mexico later that afternoon. So, let's just be clear here. If Oswald crosses into Nuevo Laredo and gets on a bus at 2:15, okay, let's take a look here. Hold on one second. All right. So, this is the bus routes nowadays. We can always assume it's going to be slower back then in the 60s, okay? So it's a 15-hour trip from New Orleans to Laredo. If you get out your little calculator and add 215 plus 12, you got 14, 2.25 plus 12. You got 14.25 hours. That's 2:15 in the afternoon that he gets in Laredo. If you minus 15 hours to that, that means Oswald would have had to have left New Orleans the day before, okay, on the 24th. Hold on. The 25th. Kind of not possible feat here. Now, let's take a look here at Dallas. Actually, let's flip this around. So you can just look at this right here. So if Oswald left Dallas and ended up in Laredo at 2:15, well, if you take 2 hours from that, that means he left around 6 a.m. Dallas time and arrived in Laredo at 2:15. Very plausible. Very, very plausible. I believe that scenario better than the other one. So what we're saying here is that Oswald left and didn't want Mrs. Payne to know he was going to be traveling to Dallas, because then she would have wondered, why are you leaving Dallas and going off for a couple of days? Okay? And another question you got to ask is, well, I want to read what Mrs. Payne's testimony was on why, she's picking up Marina in New Orleans and heading to Dallas, but yet Oswald disappears for a week, and she doesn't ask Marina, where did he go? Why is he gone for a week? She doesn't ask Oswald, where did you go? Why did you go for a week? That's a week you could have been looking for a job. Did she know that Oswald went to Mexico City? I believe I read somewhere that she did. But anyway, but she knew, it seemed like she knew after the fact. So it seems to me that he's loading Marina into the car to not travel with them, but to go to Dallas separately to meet with Maurice Bishop, his handler, and then he leaves the next morning, okay, and travels to Laredo. That seems like the more probable scenario. But the FBI swears they did a complete check of all the bus routes and everything, and they find there's no ticket of Oswald traveling from New Orleans to Dallas or Dallas to Laredo. Well, that's just assuming that he was using his own name. He had a false ID of Alec Heidel. He could have just used that. Or one of the people in the conspiracy could have drove him. Mr. Gadat could have drove him all the way from New Orleans to Dallas, all the way down to Laredo. You never know. Anyway, so that's enough of that. We'll get back to Frazier's testimony in a little bit. But what I just wanted to emphasize on this, why they're getting to all this, that did he need a shave? Did he have a beard? Did he have whiskers? This is what they're trying to prove. See, what they're trying to implant in the jury's mind is that, well, if Perry Russo saw a guy that he says was Oswald, and this Oswald had a beard and whiskers and was dirty and had kind of a beatnik hair, and maybe he's mistaken, maybe he's lying. So how does he even know? Well, if he doesn't get that information right, and that wasn't Oswald because Oswald was in Mexico City, then maybe he didn't see Clay Shaw at the party. Maybe he's making that up too, or maybe he's just mistaken. That's what they're trying to imply here. That's where they're going into these different things. Anyway, we'll keep going. All right, so we're going to pick up the George de Mohrenschildt and Joan de Mohrenschildt interview by William Altmans. I just heard something interesting. I thought kind of weird that William Altmans actually plays George de Mohrenschildt in the Oliver Stone 1991 movie JFK. I didn't know that. That's kind of interesting. Anyway.
Because that was his own opinion.
Yeah. Did he speak to you?
I listened to a really, really good 3-hour conference from Dealey Plaza, UK, and I highly recommend them. They got some great stuff. They present a lot of different sides. Some stuff I disagree with, some stuff I don't think there's a lot of evidence for. Especially, they had a guy on there, I'm not going to give names, but he was giving all this information, and I even put in the comments, I said, hey, all this information is just speculation. Where's the document for this? It was all, I believe this happened, I believe that happened, I believe this, I believe that. And which is all great. You can believe all you want all damn day, but where's the document to back up that belief? It's still America. It's still the constitutional, innocent until proven guilty, that you can believe all damn day that so-and-so did so-and-so, but if you don't have any fucking evidence, it don't matter what you believe. I can believe that I can fly, but if I don't have any documentation and not able to go out there and prove that I can fly by flapping my wings and jumping off a goddamn roof, and with the video showing that I'm flying, it's just something I believe. Okay? So that's the way, unfortunately this is an adult world, this is the way it works, that if you make extraordinary claims, you have to have extraordinary evidence to back it up. And this one guy just had nothing. Then they had this lady that came in and was talking about Des Moines Shield. She spent probably 30 years going over Des Moines Shield. Man, she had document after evidence. It was amazing. It was like night and day, And I this other guy, he started off when he was like 14, did a paper on it, and then from there on he was hooked. And that's great and all, and he's been doing it for 30-something, 40-something years since the 80s. He's interviewed hundreds of people. That's great and all, but again, you're going to have some kind of evidence. It doesn't matter how much people you've interviewed or experienced or whatever. Yeah, you've been doing this longer than me. You've got more interviews than me, and that's great. Fantastic. But let's back that up. Every time you say something, I want to hear, I'm basing it on this phrase from this document, which is what we're doing here. I'm going through and, not everything is exactly backed up by documents, but I get around back to it from my speculation. I go off on speculation. This could happen, that could happen, and then I tie it back in with the documents. I'm not doing as great a job as I'd like to, but, I don't spend, an hour talking about stuff that's all speculation. I may have proved it already in my book, but I want to see it in the video too. If you're going to say something, make sure you back it up. Anyway, but she had a lot of good stuff about Des Moines Shield. And I agree, it does seem that Des Moines Shield's not this, like she said, not this, he's kind of a hanger-on, a salesman to the rich. They don't always buy what he's selling. He's always coming up with a new scheme. This is what this Haitian thing was, she was saying. And I agree with that. Now that she's explained that, he's not Elon Musk hanging out with the janitor. He's sort of like this, pretty wealthy salesman hanging out with the janitor. Which again, that even tells you even more, because I know people, okay, I've seen people that they don't hang out. They could have not 2 dimes between them, but they want to be rich. Okay? In their mind, they want to be rich. And so they don't hang out with poor people. They don't hang out with people that, bring them down, I guess you could say. They try to emulate and hang out with other rich people because they think that if they do that, that's going to make them rich. And maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know. It always seemed to me that they were, what do you call it, ass-kissing, brown-nosing too much. If you see all these rich people out there, there's not one brown-noser among any of the rich people. They didn't get rich by brown-nosing their way to being rich. Okay? They didn't get rich by sucking up to other rich people. Almost every single person who's rich in America today is a maverick. You know? Society told them, no, you got to go do this, and they went the other way. I mean, look at the guy, Zuckerberg, who did Facebook, and look at, you know, the guy who just bought Twitter. You know, even though I don't like the guy, he's an asshole, and look at the Microsoft guy. He quit school and went and did his own thing. The guy who started Apple quit school, went and did his own thing. You know, I'm not saying that's the way to get rich, but if you look at most of the rich people, they became rich not by brown-nosing or kissing ass to other rich people. They got rich by being mavericks, by finding a niche and ignoring what people said, you can't do this, you can't do that, and went for it. Okay? And I've seen a lot of these people, especially I had some friends who were in Amway, they just thought if they just hung out with enough rich people in Amway that they're going to be, that the Amway, it's going to trickle down, make them rich, and it never did. They just made them rich. They made the Amway guys rich. That's all they did. So, this is what you have with the Morn Shield. But everybody I knew that was like that, they wouldn't have hung out with the fucking janitor. They wouldn't have hung out with some guy that wasn't at their level or didn't perceive to be at their level or didn't have the same ambitions as they to move up the chain, okay? Those would be negative people to them, okay? And so they were always hanging around rich people. They were hoping some of that money would drop off the wagon and into their pocket, you know? It's like dogs hanging around a damn dinner table for scraps. That's what I always thought it. I mean, how humiliating that you're not a maverick. You're not going to make a trailblazer, going to make your way and become rich that way. You'd rather hang around the rich people's table and beg for scraps. That's what those people were doing. So this is what the Mornshill's doing in a kind of sophisticated way. Is he's hanging around all these rich people looking for bones and looking for scraps and even suggesting that, hey, why don't you buy my bone here? This is what he's doing. But again, you're not going to have these people hanging out with the janitor, because the janitor or some guy stacking books is not going to help them with their dreams of getting rich. Okay? So this is what I'm saying. The Morn Shield, there's something else going on here with his dynamic between Oswald besides just, he lived in Minsk and I'm from Minsk and he speaks Russian poorly and I speak Russian, like a native, I mean, like, I lived in Israel and I studied Hebrew and my Hebrew is not that great. And when you go around trying to speak, the problem with trying to learn Hebrew in Israel is that when you go around trying to speak Hebrew and you're not a native, it like the natives cover their ears and they're like, no, it's okay. You can speak English. I speak English. Oh, God, I speak English. It's okay. It's like you're hurting their ears. So why would the Morn Shield be hanging out with Oswald, who didn't speak at the same level as he did? Can you imagine? Okay. You're college-educated person, and you're hanging out with a 10-year-old speaking your language. You may do it for fun, to entertain them. Maybe it's your niece, your nephew, but you're not just going to be hanging out with some 10-year-old if you're like fucking 30 years old just because they speak the same damn language as you. It's just not going to happen. So like I said, the whole reason I'm saying all this is that some other dynamic is going on besides Oswald lived in Minsk for a year or 2 years, and, the Morn Shield went to Minsk, lived in Minsk like 50 years before. Okay? Because the Morn Shield left Minsk back in the 20s after the revolution. Okay, so it's not like he's reminiscing. I mean, I've reminisced with people from cities I've lived in, but that's about, a 5-minute conversation? Maybe 30 minutes at the most, not months and months and months. Okay, so again, there's more of a dynamic going on because it has nothing to do with the language. There are different levels. It has nothing to do with the social mobility or income because they're at completely different levels. You know. So Oswald, who did you talk to today? Did you talk to anyone? Oh, I talked with, well, I wasn't even talking with Frazier at the time. I talked with this guy about developing photos at the photo lab, the job you helped me get. Oh, great. What kind of photos did you develop? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Oh, really? Oh, wow, 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 wow. This conversation is going to go on for about 5 minutes in a natural environment. Believe me, I've been there. I've been Oswald. Okay? In my synagogue, there's the rich people who own the newspaper, who own the TV stations, who own, the property companies, very, very wealthy, rich people who sit up in the front by the rabbi, and they all hang out with each other, and they don't talk to anybody else. And if they did, it's going to be, so where do you work? Oh, I work at Wells Fargo Collections. Oh, wow, that's interesting. What do you do there? Collections. Oh, what kind of collections? Oh, I call on past due credit cards. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, have a, Shabbat Shalom. Have a great Saturday with your family. Bye-bye. We got to go. We're going to lunch now. We're going to be late. That's how that conversation's going to go. Okay? But yet, you have the same guy, same dynamic, different levels of people, but he's hanging out with Oswald. He's listening to him about his marital problems. He's helping them move. He's packing the car. It doesn't make any sense. The completely different levels. So what I'm saying again, I've been saying through this whole thing, is there's a different reason that the Mornshield is hanging out with Oswald and listening to him and trying to help him with his problems. Besides, they both lived in Minsk and they both speak completely different levels of Russian. There's another dynamic going on here. Okay? And what I'm saying that dynamic is that his job was to watch Oswald. Okay? And report back. That was his job. It's the only thing that would explain it. Because you're not going to hang around someone, like I said, who's from a different socio-economic group than you. That's not the way it works in America or mostly any country. You go to Germany, you go to Mexico, okay? The rich people are going to be hanging out with the rich people. They're not going to be going down to the slums. You're not going to have the CEO of the Mexican oil company hanging out in the slums with the janitor from his building and listen to him talk about his marital problems because they both grew up in the same small town in some village in Mexico 60 years ago. This is not going to happen. Anyway, keep going.
Ever about his dishonorable discharge from the...
He never spoke about his dishonorable discharge, and I found out later that it was not dishonorable, but undesirable discharge. First, he had an honorable discharge. Then, he obviously made a false statement that he was going to leave the Marine Corps to help his mother, and instead of that, he did not do it and went to Russia to investigate the world prospects for himself, and that's when he obtained this type of a discharge.
And again, he just brought up another point. If Oswald is this Marxist revolutionary, hates imperialistic America, again, why would he join the Marines in the first place? Okay? And then, secondly, why would he give a damn that he got an undesirable discharge from the Marines because he didn't show up for his reserve duty because he defected to the Soviet Union? Okay? And think about this point here. Oswald is living in the Soviet Union. He went there to get out of the United States, to give them their secret, the secrets he learned, and to stay there forever. But yet, before he even decides to come back to the United States, he's writing, because he's been forwarded mail by his mother, he's writing the Marines, the Navy Department, about why did I get this undesirable discharge and I want this changed. Why does he care? Why would you care? You're living in another country. You said you're going to stay there forever. Why would you give a damn about your discharge papers in the Soviet Union? It's not like you're going to show them, oh, I was a Marine, and that'll help you get a better job in the Soviet Union. Why would he give a damn? But he spends an awful lot of time writing back and forth from the Soviet Union to the Marines or to the Navy Department, trying to get that changed. And then he even does that while he gets to the United States. Matter of fact, in New Orleans, he's referred to Dean Andrews, okay, about the process of getting this appealed and changed. And that's over a year after he's already back in the United States. Okay? Again, now you're back in the United States, you might have a little more interest in getting that changed, but if you're this Marxist revolutionary who thinks the United States government is imperialistic and you don't give a damn about, okay, why would you care about getting your Marine discharge papers changed? Again, why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. The only reason, again, you have to look at people's actions and not their words. The only reason it makes sense that Oswald's appealing his discharge from the Soviet Union, in appealing his discharge all the way a year later, even a year later after he's back in the United States, is because he was told he was on a mission for the Navy, for O&I, for the CIA. He's a soldier. He's doing his duty, and then he's told, hey, we're going to change your discharge. That would piss him off. Wait a minute, I'm over here on a mission for my government. I volunteered to go to this horrible communist country and do a fake defection, and now they're changing my discharge? That's not right. That's not what I was told. I was told I was going to be doing, a patriotic duty for my country, but here they are stabbing me in the back. I mean, that would make most people not want to come back to the United States at all. But what does he do? He comes back to the United States. Why? They stabbed him in the back. They changed his discharge from honorable to undesirable. And he's still appealing it. If you hate the U.S. government and you think it's a bunch of imperialists, why do you give a damn what the Marines say about you? You can just lie on your application. That little section, have you ever served in the U.S. Armed Forces? No, and then move on. It doesn't make any sense. It only makes sense, and I've thought of many possibilities. It only makes sense if he was there doing his patriotic duty as a fake defector to the Soviet Union, and then he was shocked and surprised by what he would think would be a stab in the back by the military or the government that he thought he was serving. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Anyway, we'll keep going.
Discharge, the undesirable discharge, but not dishonorable.
Jean, you have anything to add?
I don't think it was obtained, he was given.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah,
given.
that's a slight detail.
Yeah, it was given.
Judge, how did Harvey Lee Oswald, if he ever did, speak about the religious institutions in the United States? Did he indicate any sympathy or antipathy against religion?
Lee Harvey Oswald was not a violent atheist, like some people think he was. He was an agnostic, and he did not like organized religion. Many, many times he mentioned to me that the money spent on churches in this country could have been spent much more usefully by helping poor people, by building hospitals, asylums for poor, and by improving the situation in the Negro slums.
Now, does that sound like a communist to you? I mean, how many people have gone to college, even be Christians, and in their college years talk like that? A lot. In your idealistic way, hey, all this church money, with these big mega churches, they could be housing the poor and feeding the poor. How many people talk like that nowadays? Are they communists because they talk like that? No, that's just a common sense thing that most people in their 20s are going to talk like that.
Mm-hmm.
So he was against organized religion, but not particularly violently. He just disliked it.
Mm-hmm. George, how did he feel about the Communist Party regime when he was in the Soviet Union?
Neither did he like the Communist Party.
He didn't.
He did not. He said that they were all opportunists who joined the Communist Party for the purpose to obtain the benefits of better jobs, of better salaries, that they shouted and screamed at meetings and presented themselves as patriots. And actually the people in Russia, without party affiliations, were the best. Neither did he have a great respect for any political parties all over the world. He liked the people, but not the political leaders.
And again, who hasn't had this conversation in their 20s that all politicians are corrupt, both parties are bad, Republicans, Democrat, communists, socialists, whatever. They're all a bunch of crooks. How many times have we even said that ourselves in our 20s, even now? I mean, what just happened with the Trump, getting Trump elected? What was that all about? That was a bunch of 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds voting for anybody that wasn't part of the establishment. Drain the swamp. So even people in their 50s and 60s who consider themselves conservatives are saying the same thing that Oswald, this communist in the 60s, is saying. They're all corrupt. Drain the swamp. Trump's going to go in. Only reason that everyone's against Trump is because he's shaking up the establishment. Remember all that bullshit? Okay, and then Trump does absolutely nothing but reaffirm the establishment and ingrain and entrench the establishment. Okay? And Trump knew that. That's why he ran like that. He didn't believe any of that. Trump was a Democrat before, and then he switched to Republicans. He's an opportunist. Okay? None of the crap Trump said was he believed in. This is exactly what Oswald was saying. These communists didn't really believe in communism. They supposedly communists, they joined the party to get better jobs and better apartments and cars. They're opportunists, just like Trump. So there's nothing that Oswald's saying in his conversations with Des Moines that none of us haven't said or no one else would have said. You'd have to be some damn communist to say these kinds of things. Okay? And again, you got to just wonder, think about your boss at work. Think about the owner. Say you work for some corporation. Okay? Say you're working at a call center like I used to. And the CEO of the corporation has come by your desk. Hey, come on, let's go to lunch today. Oh, yeah, sure. And then hey, after work, we're going to go to this bar over here. Me and the vice president and the other CEOs of the corporation. Why don't you come over and join us, Mr. collection clerk from our credit card collections department? I mean, that's just not going to happen. And then there's going to be a lot of people jealous, favoritism. They're going to think, oh, he's never going to get fired because he's hanging out with the CEO of the corporation. Oh, he's only getting the bonus because he's best friends with the CEO other than the VPs of operations. It's just not going to happen. But you got George the Mornshield hanging out with the janitor, hanging out with a book clerk. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway.
Did you think he has been? I think somewhere I have heard you say you considered him rather useful because he spoke nicely about the United States when in the Soviet Union.
Exactly. I remember him telling us that when he was in Minsk, he used to teach his co-workers English. He used to tell them about the United States. He used to present the United States in a favorable light. And maybe that's why he wasn't so popular, because he was not really a traitor to the United States.
See?
But he has a ordinary nature. But
did you just hear what he said? So he goes to the Soviet Union, says he doesn't like America, and threatens to give up all its secrets. But then when he gets there, to his coworkers, he talks about the benefits of America, how great it is, how nice the people are. What kind of communist does anything like that? What kind of traitor does anything like that? It doesn't make any sense. Okay? And then he almost got in trouble for doing that. It doesn't make any sense. Again, you have to look and not at just what people are saying, but what they're doing. And that's where you really find out what's really going on. Another way to find out what's really going on is to talk to other people that hung around that person and talked with that person and watched that person and saw their actions. And when you get a consensus of people hanging around them, then you have a better understanding of what that person is like. That's why when you have a murderer, when you have a mass killer, when you have someone who commits a major crime, the police or the FBI will go and talk to the neighbors. They'll go talk to the coworkers. They'll go talk to his boss. They'll go talk to, his teachers, his relatives, ex-girlfriends, ex-wives, all these things, because generally people are mostly the same around most people, okay? But yet we have this Oswald, okay? If you believe everything that's been said about him, he's just lazy bum in the Marines. But before he goes in the Marines, he tries to get in when he's like underage and fakes his birth certificate. Why would a communist fake his birth certificate in the Marines early? Okay? Most communists that I would know would try to stay out of being drafted and going into the military service of the United States. Okay? They would say they're pacifist or say they're gay or mentally ill or something to stay out of being drafted. But yet we have this communist who's, I've been I've been a communist since I was 13. He writes to the Communist Party, and I'd like to get your literature, Anyway, I lost track of what I was saying there. But anyway, it just doesn't make any sense what Oswald is doing. And then when he gets to, he's in the Marines, he's a loser, right? Constantly getting in trouble. Getting in fights and dropping a Derringer and shooting himself by accident. And catching a VD, but in the line of service. Catching gonorrhea by sleeping with a Japanese prostitute. He's put in the brig. I mean, all the things supposedly he did, he should have got a dishonorable discharge. But they let him out early and give him a passport the same day. And again, if you're going to, no one ever brings this up. If you're getting out of the Marines to go help your mother in Fort Worth, Texas, okay, why do you apply for a passport at the Marine base in San Diego, in El Toro, and you're issued a passport by the State Department the same day if you're getting out of the Marines to go back to Texas to help your poor sick mother? Doesn't make much sense. Not at all. And then you show up in the Soviet Union and you threaten to give away your secrets that you're a communist and you don't like the U.S. But then when you get settled, you're jovial and talk about how nice people are in the U.S. and how nice people are in Russia and how America's not that bad. But you hate America, but you talk about how nice it is to the Russians. Doesn't make any sense at all. And then when you come back, you're supposedly espousing, you're supposed to be this crazed maniac communist, but you never hang out with any communists. You don't join any kind of communist groups. I mean, what kind of communist hangs out just by himself and creates his own Fair Play for Cuba group and passes out flyers and hires people from an unemployment office, and you're the only member of the group? It doesn't, I mean, these are indications that something is just absolutely 100% not kosher, not right here. That is all a front. Like I was talking about Hollywood. You go down to Hollywood, you take the tour, okay, and you see the buildings and the streets and the mailboxes and the steps and the windows and the doors. But then if you go up to the door and open the door, there's nothing inside. It's just a fake facade in the front. You drive around back, it's just support beams holding up, a fake building. It's all fake. There's nothing behind it. Now, most people join communist organizations through people they know. Okay? But does Oswald ever try to seek out and find anyone that's a communist? And the whole time, supposedly he's a communist from age 13? All he does is write people in New York. And of course they don't write back because they're very suspicious. And when he comes back from the Soviet Union after spending time in the Soviet Union, he's this crazed Marxist-Leninist, hates conservatives. Or where does he move? To the heart of conservatism in America, Dallas, Texas. I mean, I know his crazy mother's living there, but still. Wouldn't you think he moved to where his brother was living in New York? That's a more liberal state. Or moved to California? Or Oregon? No, he moves to the heart of conservative America, which supposedly he hates fascists and hates so much. And when he moves to New Orleans, does he move to the Quarter? Does he move to the gay part of town? The liberal part of town? No. He moves to the heart of the conservative intelligence community around Lafayette Square and Magazine Street. Doesn't make any sense. Anyway, we're going to move on here. Let me write down my time. All right. And it says in the United States, because jury trials tend to be high profile, the general public tends to overestimate the frequency of trials. Approximately 150,000 jury trials are conducted in state courts annually, and an additional 5,000 jury trials are conducted in federal courts. 2/3 of jury trials are criminal trials, and about 1/3 are civil or other. Nevertheless, the vast majority of civil cases are settled by plea bargains. That's what I was saying, about 75, 80% of all trials, all cases are settled via plea bargain, because usually the defendant doesn't have the money to hire a good lawyer. So they take a plea. You're looking at 50 years. We can get you, 10 out in 5 if you cop a plea. There you go. It's usually the vast majority of drug trials, 95% are all plea bargains. Anyway, it says some commentators contend that the guilty plea system unfairly coerces defendants into relinquishing their right to a jury trial. Others contend there never was a golden age of jury trials, but rather that juries in the early 19th century, before the rise of plea bargains, were unwitting and reflexive and generally wasteful of public resources, and because of the absence of trained professionals, little more than a slow guilty pleas themselves, and that the guilty plea system that emerged in the later half of the 19th century was superior, most cost-effective method of achieving fair outcomes. Now, if we really wanted to seek justice in the United States, what we would do to break the system would be to insist on all cases being jury trials, no plea bargains. And if you're facing charges, never, ever, ever accept a plea bargain. Force their hand. Okay? It doesn't matter what evidence they show you. Force their hand. Let a jury decide. Now, in Oswald's case, now that I've thought about it, I truly believe that because of all kinds of shenanigans that would have gone on, that Oswald would have been found guilty, but would have been released upon appeal, although he probably would have been killed in prison. But then you have to try to figure out, and this would go through the courts and everything, where would Oswald be tried? Okay? Because the case was taken out of the hands of the Dallas County District Attorney almost immediately, that Monday or Tuesday after Oswald was shot and killed. So there's some question if Oswald had lived, because killing the president at the time was not a federal offense. It's a federal offense now, because legislation has been passed after the assassination of Kennedy to make it a federal offense. But back then, it would have been a Dallas County DA prosecuting Oswald. And Dallas County was notorious for, fake evidence, coercion of witnesses, and just all kinds of shenanigans going on. And people 20, 30 years, 40 years later getting released from prison in Texas because DNA evidence proved that they didn't commit the crime. And God knows how many people went to the electric chair in in Texas, and were killed before all their appeals went through, and then we got to the point where they have DNA evidence now. So there's probably, 20, 30% of the people who were executed in Texas were probably innocent. Okay? So I believe that even if Oswald had gotten a trial, not a fair trial, but gone to trial, there would have been some kind of shenanigans going on. Witnesses, waking up dead, shooting themselves in the back of the head, evidence missing, tampered with, things like that, that would have ensured that Oswald would have been convicted, or at least not gotten a fair trial, I mean, because you think about it, there was no autopsy in Dallas County, even though the president was shot and killed in Dallas County. And according to Texas law, the JFK's body was supposed to be autopsied by the Dallas coroner. It never happened. Okay? The Secret Service absconded with the president's body. They put his body in a casket and forced by gunpoint out of Parkland Hospital and escaped into an ambulance into the presidential Air Force One jet, and literally what we have is not the vice president leaving with the president's body, former president's body on board, but an escape of guilty parties with the evidence of the dead president's body. And then you have this sham of a autopsy under military control, okay, with people, Boswell and God knows the other guy, who never did ever a criminal autopsy in the whole career they were in the military, but had been instructors. That's all they did. They never did a criminal autopsy. All kinds of procedures were completely missed there, okay? And then you've got all the evidence confiscated by the FBI, who assumed authority over the case, even though the FBI had no jurisdiction in solving presidential murders at the time. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You know, thank God Oswald got killed, because just think if Oswald had lived. You got the evidence going to the FBI, you got the body taken from the DA. You know, you'd have to have a court case of the DA, the coroner of Dallas County would have to sue the federal government to get back the already autopsied body of the President of the United States, because he was illegally stolen after the assassination, after the president was killed. I mean, unprecedented. It never has something like that happened before. Nowadays the law is clear that somewhere, somehow, still don't know about the coroner, because I don't know if there's any federal coroners that would handle that. I would think that it would still go to a local coroner, okay? But because of orders by the new president, Vice President Johnson, he ordered the Secret Service to take the body, okay, and then have this. I mean, it had to have been the vice president, because who else would be able to control the Secret Service? Who else would be able to control the military doctors at Bethesda or Walter Reed or wherever it was? No one would have that multiple control except the new president, former Vice President Johnson. So Oswald wouldn't have gotten a fair trial, even if he had lived, you know. It would have been almost impossible for him to get a fair trial. And another thing we have to remember is that the preponderance of national pressure on the jury, probably an all-white jury, all mostly male conservative jury in Dallas County, if they had a trial in Dallas County. Okay? The preponderance would be, well, if Oswald didn't do it, who did? And they didn't find anybody else. So Oswald must have done it. So despite there was no fingerprints on the weapon, despite that Oswald was seen in the lunchroom 10 minutes before the assassination and 90 seconds after the assassination on the second floor, 4 floors down from where the rifle supposedly was shot at the president, okay? Despite the fact that all the Parkland doctors saw that the shot came from the front right and the back of the president's head was blown out, they said that the killer shot came from behind the president, from the 6th floor depository, and killed him that way. So there'd be all this confusion of evidence. And do you think Oswald, with the public defender, is going to get a fair trial? You think that public defender is going to go all out? Yeah, there may be people that volunteer, like Mark Lane, to defend Oswald. But think about all the evidence that we didn't know about back then that we know about now. You know, the Dictabelt tape. All the evidence that was suppressed. You know, Jesse Curry's out there saying that, you know, oh yeah, we found his fingerprints on the gun. They didn't find no damn fingerprints on the gun. They didn't find Oswald's fingerprints on the gun to the Dallas crime lab. The rifle was sent to the FBI the next week when all the evidence was confiscated. They didn't find anything. When the weapon came back, all of a sudden they found a palm print from Oswald's dead hand on the barrel, inside barrel of the rifle. I mean, how the hell do you look at a rifle? You know, the best chance of finding a fingerprint is right at the scene of the crime. The oil's fresh. You can dust the rifle. The oil's going to stick to the dust. And the fingerprint is going to come right off when you tape it right there. But yet, they find a weapon that's been handled by several different people and shipped to another city and then shipped back. And then they find, 3-4 days later, they find a fingerprint or palm print. But again, we went over all that. It's impossible for Oswald to have assembled that rifle up on that 6th floor without someone seeing him, and also without him leaving any fingerprints on the stock of the rifle, on the barrel, on the telescopic scope, on the trigger mechanism while he's firing the rifle, on the bolt as he's pulling the bolt back 3 or 4 times to fire that rifle, on the clip while there's no thumbprint on the top of any of the casings as he's pushing that round into the clip. There's nothing there. You know, like I said, if it was a normal circumstance trial, Better Call Saul could have got Oswald off walking the first couple of days. But yet, now that I think about it, with all the shenanigans that have been going on the last 60 years and all the shit that went on in Dallas County with their criminal justice system there, I mean, do we really, really, really think that if they're going to steal the body of the President of the United States away from the Dallas coroner who's standing right there at the hospital and saying, hey, this is the state of Dallas, this is the state of Texas, and in the state of Texas, you have to have, you know, under a murder, you have to have an autopsy. And they draw guns and push through him. You think they're going to run over the damn coroner, that they're not going to do any other shenanigans if Oswald had lived? I mean, would we have found Oswald hanging from a rope, you know, in his jail cell with a suicide note typed up in his jail cell? I mean, Oswald was going to die, never going to make it to trial. Okay? That's just the way there was too much tidal wave action in that direction to change the outcome. Like I said, you know, from the day the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, there was no doubt that the way that war was going to end was Allied troops entering Berlin and taking most of Germany, and us either invading Japan or dropping a bomb on Japan, going for Tokyo. There was no way it was going to end any way different. You know, if the Germans had invented a nuclear bomb and dropped it on the Russians along the way, they would have wiped out a couple 100,000, but still, Stalin would have just kept sending him through the radiation. You know, If the Germans had dropped a bomb on Normandy Beach on D-Day, we would have invaded someplace else 6 months later. So you can delay things, you can misdirect things, but eventually the outcome, if there's enough tidal force behind it, is going to achieve the same results, either now or later. Like Kennedy. Kennedy, at least in the Kennedy family, one of the Kennedys was destined to be president. One. At least. That was, the senior Kennedy's goal was to be a player through his children. His first child was supposed to be the oldest one, I think Jack or whatever his name was supposed to be, but he died in World War II. And then the next one steps up, John Kennedy. And you had to go through the system, congressman, senator, then you run with your dad's money for president, and he barely made it. And then when he was gunned down, RFK was going to run for president, and then his brother, who's attorney general at the time, gets gunned down also. They had to stop the tidal force of the Kennedys with their charisma, their intellect, and their money. They had to eliminate them. And that's what they did. And here's Ted Kennedy. And then, lo and behold, Ted Kennedy has an accident driving off the bridge and leaving, at Chappaquiddick, some kind of accident, car accident, and leaving this girl, Mary Jo Kepnick, whatever her name, to drown in the river there and not report it to the police for 8 hours. So his career is finished. And then when you get into Watergate, what was the whole point of Watergate? Is to stop Ted Kennedy from running for president in 1972. That was essentially one of the main points of Watergate, was to find out if another Kennedy was going to run. Okay? And then, 27 years later, if you want to believe in the conspiracy continues, you got John Jr., who was a baby when his dad was killed, crashes his plane off of Martha's Vineyard in 1999 and dies. Whether you believe that was an accident or believe that was another part of this right-wing conservative force trying to stop another Kennedy, I don't know. A lot of accidents in that family. Anyway, I don't think Oswald would have made it to a trial. I think he would have been gunned down, blown up, suicide by hanging in his prison cell. Something would have happened. Because these guys aren't stopping. They're throwing at every level to ensure they get what they want. If you have to kill 1 million people to do it, that's what they're going to do. And I'll just spell it out. There is a conservative, mostly Southern power group in the United States that's the driving force since the Civil War, behind all the violence and all the wars that's going on with America. There's a peaceful, liberal helping hand of America that we always put out there, the Marshall Plan, throwing MREs out the back of a C-130 in Afghanistan before we bomb them, helping rebuild Iraq after we bombed them. But if you look at it, it's mostly this conservative, ultra-conservative, neoconservative group of mostly Southerners, mostly Texas. If you want to, Dallas, Texas is the ground zero of it, but they got people all over the place, okay? And this is one of the driving forces behind America's policy, why a lot of people don't like America. You know, we had the Monroe Doctrine, where we went into any country, invaded any country in Central and South America, because if we didn't like their government, we sent in the Marines. You know, and they tried to do that in Cuba. They tried to push Kennedy into sending in the Marines, like we did in Haiti, like we did in the Dominican Republic, like we did in Panama, like we did in Nicaragua, like we did in Guatemala, like we did in Honduras and Mexico. You know, gunboat diplomacy. And it's just a few, you know, it's not everyone. There's some good people in the South. There's some good conservatives, I guess. But it's a driving force of people who think they're better than everyone else. They're mostly white, mostly Protestant. That's another thing. Kennedy was Catholic. They didn't like that. Ultra-conservative. And if you look through history, the last 100, 200 years, especially since the Civil War, that they're the main driving force of what's going on with all these things, especially the last 60 years. Anyway, that's just my take on it. I'm not saying there's some grand conspiracy. You know, you don't need a grand conspiracy. You just need a bunch of people who think the same. Okay? And then they can demonize everyone else. Anyway, that's enough of that. All right, take care.